As we conclude Chapter 2 on reason, let's consolidate everything we've learned about how theism alone can ground the rationality that makes all philosophical inquiry possible. Frank Turek presents powerful arguments, but let's synthesize them more explicitly and show how they form an interconnected, devastating case against naturalism. First, the foundational claim. The laws of logic are immaterial, universal, and unchanging. They exist, they govern all rational thought, but they have no physical properties whatsoever. You cannot measure, weigh, or locate them in space, yet they're binding on all reasoning, everywhere, always. They were true before humans evolved and would remain true even if all minds ceased. This creates an immediate problem for materialism. If only physical, material things exist, how can immaterial, logical laws exist? Materialism has no answer. Some claim they're conventions, but we discover them, not invent them. Some claim they're evolutionary adaptations, but they apply universally, not just to survival-related reasoning. Some claim they're descriptions of brain processes, but they governed reality before brains existed. Every materialist explanation fails. Theism, by contrast, offers a coherent account. Logical laws reflect the rational nature of God himself. God is logos, eternal reason. Logic flows from his essence, not from physical processes or evolutionary accidents. Second, the argument from reason. Atheistic materialism cannot account for reasoning itself because it reduces thoughts to physical brain states determined by non-rational causes. If your belief that 2 + 2 = 4 is merely neurons firing according to physics and chemistry, then it's caused by prior physical states, not justified by reasons or evidence. This severs the connection between belief and truth. Physical causation doesn't care about rationality, it just produces whatever effects the prior states determine. Materialism explains why we believe, but not whether we should believe. It accounts for psychological causation, but not rational justification. And without rational justification, all arguments, including arguments for materialism, lose credibility. The theory undercuts itself. It's self-refuting. C.S. Lewis saw this clearly. If naturalism is true, then we have no reason to trust naturalism because our reasoning faculties aren't aimed at truth, but at survival, or are merely physical processes without normative force.
Third, the evolutionary argument against naturalism demonstrates that evolutionary naturalism is literally self-defeating when applied to human rationality. Evolution by natural selection operates through one primary mechanism: differential survival and reproduction. What's being selected is not truth, but adaptive behaviors. An organism can survive perfectly well with false beliefs as long as those beliefs produce survival-enhancing behaviors. Evolution cares about fitness, not truth. Therefore, if naturalism and evolution are both true, we have no reason to trust our cognitive faculties for truth, especially regarding abstract matters like logic, mathematics, philosophy, and theology, which have no direct survival value. But if we can't trust our cognitive faculties, we can't trust the reasoning that led us to accept naturalism and evolution in the first place. The theory self-destructs. Alvin Plantinga formalized this brilliantly. If our beliefs are evolutionary adaptations selected for survival rather than truth, then we have a defeater for trusting those beliefs. And if we can't trust our beliefs, we can't trust the belief in evolutionary naturalism. It's rationally incoherent. Fourth, self-defeating claims expose the internal contradictions in many atheistic and relativistic positions. Statements like, "There is no truth," "All truth is relative," "You shouldn't judge," and "Science is the only way to know truth," all refute themselves by their own standards. These aren't merely weak arguments, they're logically impossible positions. They pull the rug out from under their own feet. Turek rightly emphasizes spotting these self-defeating claims because they reveal worldviews that are rationally untenable. Now, here's the crucial synthesis. All these arguments converge on the same conclusion. Materialism cannot ground rationality. It cannot explain immaterial logical laws. It cannot explain why reasoning tracks truth rather than merely producing adaptive behaviors. It cannot escape self-defeat when its own principles are applied consistently. By contrast, theism, specifically Christian theism grounded in the Logos doctrine, provides a coherent, comprehensive explanation for everything materialism fails to account for. Why do immaterial logical laws exist? Because they reflect God's rational nature. Why can human minds grasp these laws? Because we're made in God's image, imago Dei. Why does reasoning track truth? Because a truthful God designed our cognitive faculties to correspond with reality. Why is there correspondence between the structure of reality and the structure of thought? Because the same Logos who created reality also created rational minds. There's a built-in harmony. Let's strengthen this synthesis with Christian orthodox theology to show the richness of the theistic explanation. First, the Logos doctrine from John chapter 1 provides the ultimate foundation. In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. All things were made through him. Logos means word, reason, rational principle. Christ is the eternal reason through whom all things were made. This isn't poetic language, it's profound metaphysics. The universe is intelligible because it was created by intelligence. Rationality pervades reality because reality itself proceeds from the Logos. Second, divine simplicity explains why logic is eternal and unchanging. In classical theology, God is not composite. His attributes aren't separate qualities added to his being, but are unified in his simple essence. God's rationality isn't a feature he possesses, it's what he is. Therefore, logic, reflecting God's rational nature, is as eternal and unchanging as God himself. Third, the doctrine of imago Dei explains why humans alone among all creatures pursue knowledge for its own sake. We study astronomy, philosophy, and theology, disciplines with no survival payoff because we're designed for truth-seeking. Our rational faculties are ordered toward truth by design, not by evolutionary accident. This is our telos, our purpose. Fourth, divine providence explains the reliability of cognitive faculties. God doesn't merely create and walk away, he sustains creation continuously. Our reasoning faculties work because God upholds them in their proper function. This is creatio continua, continuous divine conservation of the order that makes rationality possible. Now, what are the key takeaways for Turek to emphasize more strongly? First, frame the argument from reason as a transcendental argument. It's not merely materialism fails, therefore theism. It's rationality itself requires preconditions that only theism can provide. Logic, truth, reasoning, these are transcendental necessities that demand a transcendent ground. Second, clarify that this argument establishes generic theism, not specifically Christianity, though Christianity provides the fullest explanation through the Logos doctrine. The argument shows that ultimate reality is more like mind than matter, more like agent than mechanism. Specific Christian doctrines like the Trinity, incarnation, and atonement require additional argumentation. Third, address the pastoral application. This isn't just intellectual gymnastics. When someone argues against God, they're using rationality that their worldview cannot account for. Gently showing this contradiction can be the first step toward intellectual honesty and openness to theism. Finally, avoid common pitfalls. Don't claim atheists can't reason. They obviously can, often brilliantly. The claim is that atheistic materialism cannot account for the reliability of reasoning. Atheists reason because they're made in God's image, whether they acknowledge it or not. They borrow capital from the theistic worldview every time they think logically.
In summary, Chapter 2 on reason demonstrates that naturalism is rationally incoherent at its foundation. It cannot ground the immaterial laws of logic, cannot explain why reasoning tracks truth, and self-destructs when its principles are applied consistently. Christian theism, grounded in the Logos doctrine, provides the only coherent explanation for rationality itself. Turek should synthesize these arguments more explicitly, integrate classical theology more deeply, frame them as transcendental arguments, and apply them pastorally. The argument from reason isn't just one apologetic tool among many, it's foundational, showing that atheism cannot even account for the reliability of reasoning needed to argue against God. Next, we'll move to slide 24 and begin Chapter 3 on information and intentionality, where we'll explore how DNA encodes complex specified information that points to an intelligent mind, and how natural objects exhibit goal-directed behavior that naturalism struggles to explain without invoking purpose and design.
Welcome to Chapter 3, Information and Intentionality. This is where Frank Turek shifts from abstract philosophical arguments to concrete biological evidence. His central claims are these: DNA encodes complex specified information that points to an intelligent mind, and natural objects exhibit goal-directed behavior that naturalism struggles to account for because it reduces everything to efficient causation, prior physical states mechanically producing subsequent states without purpose or direction. But biology exhibits purpose everywhere. Organs have functions, behavior serves survival goals, systems are integrated toward ends. How do we explain this if matter is all there is and purpose is an illusion?
Now, how can Turek strengthen these arguments philosophically? Let's begin by distinguishing between different types of information. Not all patterns are information. Shannon information measures surprise or improbability, but doesn't capture meaning or function. For the design argument, what matters is specified complexity, patterns that are both improbable and functionally specified. Consider a random sequence of letters. It's improbable but not specified. The word "the" is specified but not complex. Think of Shakespeare's plays. They are both highly improbable arrangements that convey precise meaning. DNA exhibits specified complexity. It's not merely improbable chemical arrangements, it's functional sequences that perform specific biological tasks. This insight comes from William Dembski's work on intelligent design, and Turek should emphasize this distinction more clearly. Moving on, Turek must address the origin of information more rigorously. The challenge isn't merely explaining how information increases. Natural selection can shuffle and amplify existing information. The real challenge is explaining the origin of the first functional information-bearing molecules. How did the genetic code arise? How did the first self-replicating systems with specified complexity come into existence? This is where naturalism faces its greatest difficulty. Prebiotic chemistry experiments have failed to produce anything approaching the information density and functional specificity found in even the simplest living cells. The gap isn't being closed by research, it's widening. Finally, let's engage the concept of teleology more deeply. Aristotle distinguished 4 types of causes: material, formal, efficient, and final. Modern science, following Bacon and Newton, deliberately excluded final causes, purposes, or ends from its methodology. This was productive for studying physics and chemistry, where final causality doesn't obviously apply, but biology is different. Organisms exhibit intrinsic directedness. Removing final causality from biology doesn't eliminate the phenomenon, it just forces us to use awkward circumlocutions. When we say the heart's function is to pump blood, are we speaking of real functions or mechanical processes? Either biological systems truly have purposes, indicating naturalism's falsehood, or purpose talk is heuristic, suggesting we're systematically deceiving ourselves about life's nature. Let's strengthen this with Christian orthodox theology to show why theism provides the best explanation. First, the doctrine of logos grounds both information and intentionality. John chapter 1 verse 3 says, "All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made." The logos, divine word and reason, is the source of both rational order and purposeful design in creation. Information exists in DNA because the logos encoded it, and purpose exists in organisms because the logos designed them with ends in view. Second, integrate the distinction between primary and secondary causation from Aquinas. God is the primary cause who establishes the natures of things. Secondary causes are the natural processes through which those natures operate. When we study how hearts pump blood, we're investigating secondary causes, but these presuppose the primary cause, God, who designed biological systems with specific natures and functions. This avoids the God of the gaps problem. We're not saying science can't explain this, therefore God. We're saying science reveals functional complexity and goal-directedness that points beyond mere mechanism to intelligent, purposeful design as the ultimate explanation. Third, the doctrine of creation ex nihilo means God created matter with built-in potentials. Genesis chapter 1 describes God creating plants and animals according to their kinds, each with intrinsic natures that determine their development. This biblical view predicts the kind of teleology we observe. Organisms aren't randomly assembled, they're designed systems unfolding according to God-given blueprints. Now, Turek must avoid certain pitfalls. First, don't overstate the argument. The information argument establishes intelligent design, not specifically Christianity. It's compatible with various theistic positions. Christianity provides additional context through the Logos doctrine, but the basic argument stands on its own. Second, engage the objection that evolution can generate information through natural selection. The response, selection operates on existing functional information. It doesn't explain the origin of the genetic code itself or the first information-bearing molecules. Third, avoid the God of the gaps fallacy explicitly. The design inference isn't based on ignorance, but on positive knowledge of how information and goal-directed systems arise, always from minds in our uniform experience. In summary, Chapter 3 examines biological information and intentionality as evidence for intelligent design. DNA encodes complex, specified information that, by all our experience, requires a mind. Living organisms exhibit intrinsic purposefulness that naturalism cannot coherently explain. Christian theism, grounded in the Logos doctrine, provides the ultimate explanation. An intelligent creator designed life with functional information and purposeful ends. Turek must distinguish types of information, address origin more rigorously, engage teleology philosophically, integrate Logos theology, and avoid logical pitfalls. These enhancements make the argument from biology powerful evidence for God. Next, we'll move to slide 25, where we'll examine DNA more closely as the cell's software, exploring how its four-letter chemical alphabet stores vast amounts of specific information in a digital format that rivals any human-engineered code. Let's delve deeper into the DNA, metaphorically described as the cell's software, a comparison that's not merely poetic but profoundly accurate. Frank Turek emphasizes this metaphor, but today we aim to expand it philosophically and demonstrate why DNA serves as compelling evidence for intelligent design. First, let's examine the fundamental facts. DNA operates using a four-letter chemical alphabet: adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine, often abbreviated as A, T, C, and G. These bases pair in predetermined ways along the double helix, forming sequences that encode instructions for protein synthesis, regulate cellular processes, and guide entire organisms from conception to maturation. Now here's what makes this truly remarkable. DNA represents a digital code. Unlike continuous analog signals, DNA consists of discrete symbolic information stored in a molecular form. The 4 bases function similarly to binary codes, zeros and ones, albeit with greater complexity. 3-letter sequences known as codons specify distinct amino acids, which in turn chain and fold into functional proteins, the workhorses of cellular activity. The comparison to computer software is not superficial. Software consists of symbolic instructions, abstract patterns that direct physical hardware to perform specific tasks. DNA fulfills this identical role. Abstract chemical codes steer cellular machinery to synthesize proteins and regulate biological dynamics. Remarkably, the information is independent of its medium. You could transcribe the same software across diverse programming languages on varied hardware. Similarly, DNA's information could theoretically be encoded using alternate chemical systems. What is paramount is the functional sequence, not the mere physical substrate. Now here's the philosophical pivot. Information does not spontaneously emanate from physical processes. In every observable scenario, software code, written language, architectural blueprints, musical scores, information traces its origin to an intelligent mind. We never observe meaningful, specified information arising from undirected chemical reactions. Why then should DNA be an exception? This fundamental characteristic of information supports the notion of a deliberate designer and creator instilled with intelligence to embed data and purpose within creation.
Let's examine the information density in DNA to appreciate just how extraordinary this is. A single human cell contains approximately 3 billion base pairs in its nuclear DNA. If you printed this information in standard book format, it would fill thousands of volumes, an entire library contained in a microscopic nucleus. But it's not just the quantity, it's the specificity and functionality. DNA sequences aren't random arrangements. They encode precise instructions that, when executed by cellular machinery, produce functional proteins with specific 3-dimensional shapes necessary for biological processes. Change a single letter in certain sequences, a point mutation, and you can lose function, cause disease, or even kill the organism. This is specified complexity, not merely complex, but complex in a way that performs a function. Now, Turek must strengthen this argument by addressing the origin problem more rigorously. Natural selection can explain how existing functional information is refined, amplified, or adapted, but it cannot explain the origin of the first information-bearing molecules or the genetic code itself. This is the fundamental challenge for naturalism. Where did the code come from? Prebiotic chemistry experiments attempting to produce life from non-life have failed spectacularly at this level. The famous Miller-Urey experiment produced some amino acids, building blocks, but that's like producing letters of the alphabet and claiming you've explained Shakespeare. The gap between amino acids and functional proteins, let alone self-replicating information systems, is vast. Moreover, the genetic code exhibits what information theorists call optimal design features. The codon assignments minimize the impact of errors. Mutations in certain positions often result in amino acids with similar properties, reducing harmful effects. This error-correcting capability is a hallmark of intelligent design in human communication systems.
Now, let's strengthen this with Christian orthodox theology to show why DNA points to the Logos. First, the doctrine of the Logos from John chapter 1 provides the ultimate explanation for biological information. In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. All things were made through him. Logos means word, reason, rational principle. Christ is the divine word through whom all things were made. DNA is literally encoded words, chemical letters forming meaningful sequences. This isn't accidental. It reflects the creative activity of the Logos who speaks creation into existence. Second, integrate the concept of divine wisdom from Proverbs chapter 8. Wisdom personified declares, "The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his work, before his deeds of old. I was appointed from eternity, from the beginning, before the world began." Divine wisdom designed creation with intricate detail. DNA's sophistication reflects this wisdom, not random accident, but purposeful design by an infinitely intelligent creator. Third, address the objection, couldn't evolution generate this information over time? The response requires nuance. Natural selection can modify existing functional information, but it operates on already living, reproducing organisms with genetic systems in place. The question is, how did the first information-bearing system arise? Evolution presupposes what it's being asked to explain: functional information that can replicate and be selected. This is circular. Moreover, information theory demonstrates that random processes plus selection can optimize existing information but struggle to generate new functional information from scratch. The search space is too vast, and most sequences are non-functional. Now, Turek must avoid certain pitfalls. First, don't overstate the argument. The information argument establishes intelligent design, not specifically Christianity. Christianity provides deeper context through the Logos theology, but the basic inference stands independently. Second, engage the junk DNA objection honestly. Critics once claimed most DNA was non-functional evolutionary leftovers, but the ENCODE project revealed that far more of the genome is functional than previously thought, regulating gene expression, controlling development, and performing other roles. What appeared as junk was actually sophisticated regulatory code we didn't yet understand. Third, clarify the relationship between design and mechanism. Recognizing design doesn't mean rejecting all natural processes. God could use natural mechanisms as means to accomplish designed ends. The question is whether those mechanisms are sufficient to generate the information we observe, or whether they point beyond themselves to an intelligent source. In summary, DNA is genuinely the cell's software, a digital code storing vast amounts of specified functional information in a molecular medium. By all our uniform experience, such information always traces back to intelligent minds. The information density, specificity, and optimal design features in DNA powerfully suggest an intelligent designer. Christian theology, grounded in the Logos doctrine, provides the ultimate explanation: the divine word encoded life with meaningful information. Turek should emphasize the software analogy more rigorously, address the origin problem explicitly, integrate the Logos theology, and engage objections carefully. This makes DNA one of the most compelling evidences for intelligent design.
Now we arrive at a fundamental principle that lies at the heart of the information argument. Information requires a mind. First, let's establish what we mean by information. Not all patterns are information. A random sequence of letters like J, K, Q, W, P, W, M, Z, X, C, V, B, N contains Shannon information in the sense of surprise or improbability, but it conveys no meaning and serves no function. The word "the" is meaningful but not complex. What matters for the design inference is specified complexity, patterns that are both improbable and functionally specified to accomplish a purpose. Now, here's the universal principle we observe. In every case within our uniform experience, meaningful specified information
always traces back to an intelligent mind. Software code comes from programmers, written language comes from authors, musical scores come from composers, blueprints come from architects, recipes come from chefs. The Rosetta Stone's hieroglyphs came from ancient scribes. We never observe meaningful, functionally specified information arising spontaneously from undirected physical or chemical processes. This is not an argument from ignorance, it's an argument from positive, uniform experience. We know how information arises, intelligent agents produce it. Let me illustrate with examples. Imagine you're walking on a beach and you see pebbles arranged to spell John loves Mary. You immediately infer intelligence. Someone arranged those pebbles intentionally. You don't think wind and waves randomly produced that pattern, even though it's physically possible. Why? Because the pattern exhibits specified complexity. It's both improbable and meaningful. Now imagine you discover a computer chip in the sand. Even if you've never seen a computer before, examining the intricate circuits, the precise arrangement of components, the functional integration, you'd infer design. The complexity isn't random, it's specified toward information processing.
Let's apply the principle of specified complexity to DNA. DNA in human beings consists of approximately 3 billion base pairs, encoding specific instructions for building proteins, regulating gene expression, and guiding biological development. This information is not random, it's functionally specified. Altering certain sequences can result in loss of function, cause disease, or be fatal to the organism. According to the universal principle that specified information always comes from minds, we infer that DNA's information originated from a mind. This inference is consistent with the best explanation approach, a method widely employed in science and everyday reasoning. Now, Turek can enhance this argument by addressing potential objections more rigorously. Objection 1. Natural selection generates information over time. The response requires nuance. While natural selection can refine and amplify existing functional information, it operates on organisms already possessing genetic systems. It cannot explain the origin of these first information-bearing molecules or the genetic code itself. Selection depends on replicators with variation and heredity. It presupposes the very thing that requires explanation. Furthermore, information theory shows that random mutation coupled with selection optimizes existing information, but struggles to produce genuinely novel functional information from scratch. The search space is too vast. Most sequences are non-functional. Discovering functional sequences by chance is akin to locating a specific grain of sand on all the world's beaches. Objection 2. The argument is an analogy, and analogies can fail. However, this is not merely analogy, it's uniformity of experience. In every situation we observe directly, specified information emanates from minds. We're applying the same reasoning scientists use for unobserved causes. We don't directly observe electrons, black holes, or the Big Bang, but we infer them from their effects, using principles grounded in uniform experience. Design in DNA is inferred using the same methodology. To strengthen this with Christian orthodox theology, we look to John chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. Logos means word, reason, rational principle. Christ is the divine word through whom all things were made. DNA is literally encoded words, chemical letters forming meaningful sequences. This isn't metaphor, it's profound reality. The divine word speaks creation into existence, encoding information into the fabric of life. And now we integrate the doctrine of divine wisdom from Proverbs chapter 8. Wisdom personified declares her role in creation. I was there when he set the heavens in place, when he marked out the horizon on the face of the deep, when he established the clouds above and fixed securely the fountains of the deep. Divine wisdom designed creation with exquisite detail and functional integration. DNA's information reflects this wisdom, purposeful, elegant, efficient design by an infinitely intelligent creator. Moreover, addressing the philosophical principle more deeply, we turn to Aquinas. Aquinas distinguished between efficient causation, the agent that produces an effect, and formal causation, the pattern or form impressed on matter. DNA exhibits formal causality. Information imposes form on matter, directing development and function. Yet form itself requires a formal cause, an intelligent agent who conceives the pattern. Random processes can't generate specified form, only minds can. But Turek should avoid certain pitfalls. First, don't overstate the conclusion. The information argument establishes intelligent design, not specifically Christianity. Christianity provides deeper context through the Logos theology, but the basic inference, information requires mind, stands on its own philosophical grounds. Second, engage the aliens-designed life objection transparently. Some critics suggest extraterrestrial intelligence rather than God. The response, this just defers the question, where did the aliens' information come from? If their information also required a designer, we face infinite regress. Ultimately, we need a self-existent, intelligent source, precisely what theism proposes. And lastly, clarify what mind means. We're not necessarily claiming DNA was designed by a human-like mind with temporal thought processes. We're inferring an intelligent source capable of encoding functional information, whatever the nature of that intelligence. Christian theology specifies it as the eternal Logos, but the basic inference is philosophically robust. In summary, specified information always emerges from minds in our uniform experience. DNA contains vast amounts of specified functional information, so by inference to the best explanation, DNA's information came from a mind. Christian theology identifies that mind as the Logos, divine word and wisdom, who spoke creation into existence and encoded life with meaningful information. Turek should emphasize the universality of this principle, tackle objections about natural selection and analogy, integrate Logos theology, and avoid overstating or understating the conclusion. This makes the information argument one of the most compelling evidences for God. Next, we'll move to slide 27, where we'll examine why the origin of life presents such profound difficulties for naturalistic explanations, exploring the astronomical improbabilities involved in assembling functional proteins and the first self-replicating systems purely by chance.
Welcome to slide 27, where we examine one of the most formidable challenges facing naturalistic explanations of life, the origin of life itself. Frank Turek highlights the astronomical improbability of assembling functional proteins in DNA by chance, arguing that life's information-rich machinery points to intelligent design. Let me begin with the core problem. Life as we know it requires three things. First, functional proteins, typically chains of 150 to 300 amino acids folded into precise three-dimensional shapes.
Second, DNA or RNA to store and transmit genetic information. Third, a coordinated system where nucleic acids and proteins work together. DNA codes for proteins, but proteins are needed to read and replicate DNA. The probability challenge is staggering. Consider a single functional protein of 150 amino acids. There are 20 standard amino acids, so the number of possible sequences is 20 to the power of 150. That's approximately 10 to the power of 195. Even if only a tiny fraction of these sequences are functional, the odds of randomly assembling even one functional protein are vanishingly small. Physicist Fred Hoyle famously compared the probability to a tornado sweeping through a junkyard and assembling a Boeing 747. But the problem is worse. Life requires not just one protein, but hundreds of interdependent proteins, plus the genetic code, plus the machinery to translate that code. This is often called the chicken and egg problem. Proteins are needed to make DNA, but DNA is needed to make proteins. How did this system get started? Turek points to this as evidence of intelligent design. If the probability of chance assembly is effectively zero, and if we have no plausible naturalistic mechanism, the inference to design becomes compelling.
To critically strengthen Turek's argument, we must first distinguish between two kinds of improbability. There's the improbability of forming any particular sequence by chance, illustrated by Hoyle's Boeing 747 analogy. However, there's also the improbability of forming a functional sequence. For most proteins, the vast majority of possible sequences are non-functional. Molecular biologist Douglas Axe's work suggests that for a protein of typical length, only about 1 in 10 to the 77th sequences are functional. This highlights the vast search space for functional proteins, rendering random searches woefully inadequate. Moreover, we must emphasize the origin of information problem more explicitly. Life is not just chemistry, it is specified information. DNA sequences are not random, but encode instructions for building proteins. As explored on slide 26, specified complexity, information that is both complex and conforms to an independent pattern, is the hallmark of intelligence, abundantly evident in the genetic code. It's not simply the improbability of spontaneously assembling DNA, but rather how the information within DNA signifies a source of rationality and intentionality. Turning to prebiotic chemistry, the 1953 Miller-Urey experiment, sometimes cited as evidence that life could arise naturally, produced only a few amino acids, and in a racemic left- and right-handed mixture, whereas life's amino acids are solely left-handed. Producing amino acids is a major step away from assembling functional proteins, and notably a self-replicating system. As origin of life researchers like James Tour argue, we're far from a naturalistic explanation. Finally, the thermodynamic challenge must be faced. Constructing complex molecules such as proteins and nucleic acids in prebiotic conditions demands an energy influx and a move from equilibrium. Without enzymes and cellular machinery, such assembly is thermodynamically unfavorable, tending toward breakdown instead of building up. This constitutes yet another obstacle for naturalistic models. In summary, the origin of life issue extends beyond mere probability. It revolves around the absence of any known natural mechanism capable of generating the specified complexity inherent in even the simplest living cells.
The Miller-Urey experiment of 1953 attempted to mimic the conditions thought to exist on early Earth by Stanley Miller and Harold Urey. Initially hailed as a groundbreaking proof that life's fundamental building blocks could arise naturally, several critical issues challenge its conclusions in support of abiogenesis. Firstly, recent geological evidence challenges the primary assumption of a reducing atmosphere rich in methane and ammonia. Instead, the early Earth likely had a neutral or even oxidizing atmosphere with nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and water vapor, where fewer organic compounds would form, and those that did would degrade rapidly. Secondly, the experiment produced a racemic mix of left and right-handed amino acids, yet life exclusively uses left-handed amino acids and right-handed sugars, vital for proper biological function. No known naturalistic process explains the necessary homochirality. Thirdly, in the experiment, the amino acids were generated in low concentrations among destructive chemicals, a scenario not conducive to stable accumulation in prebiotic conditions. Lastly, while amino acids are building blocks akin to letters of an alphabet, explaining the emergence of organized, functioning biological systems from these components is a leap as vast as claiming Shakespeare's plays can arise from spilling ink on paper.
Let's delve deeper into the information origin problem. Life transcends mere chemistry. It is chemistry imbued with information. DNA is more than just a collection of nucleotides. It encodes instructions through a sequence that exemplifies specified complexity. Information that is not only complex and non-random, but also specified, matching an independent pattern or function. Consider this analogy. Discovering the letters S-A-N-D etched in the sand suggests an intelligent agent intentionally arranged them to convey meaning. In contrast, a random pattern of shells does not invoke such inference due to lack of specification. DNA parallels this concept, but with far greater complexity. Its base sequences encode precise instructions for protein synthesis. These sequences are neither random nor repetitive, but functionally specified. A single nucleotide alteration can render a protein dysfunctional. The pertinent inquiry is the origin of this specified information. Frank Turek posits that it originates from a mind, the logos or divine word, aligning with long-standing information theory discussions. William Dembski's notion of specified complexity posits that human artifacts exhibiting such complexity invariably trace back to intelligence, contrasting with natural processes that lack this capacity for generation. The naturalist perspective suggests natural selection as an explanation for information generation. However, natural selection presupposes the existence of replicators, thereby failing to address the genesis of the inaugural replicator. It fine-tunes existing information but does not spontaneously generate semantic, functional content. The genesis of the genetic code itself remains an enigma for naturalism. Prominent synthetic chemist James Tour highlights this persistent gap, stressing the absence of a credible naturalistic explanation for life's origin. This chasm between non-living chemistry and living cells widens as complexity is further revealed.
Let's integrate Christian orthodox theology on the origin of life. First, the Logos doctrine. In John's Gospel, we read, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through Him all things were made. Without Him nothing was made that has been made. In Him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind." This passage identifies Christ as the Logos, the divine word, reason or rationality, through whom all things were created. The Logos is not just a creative force, but the source of order, rationality, and meaning in the universe. When we observe specified information in DNA, we are observing the fingerprint of the Logos. The genetic code is not arbitrary. It exhibits rationality, functionality, and purpose, characteristics that point back to a rational, purposeful creator. Augustine of Hippo taught that God created the world with seminal reasons,
rational principles embedded in creation that unfold over time. This is not the same as modern evolutionary theory, but it recognizes that God's creative activity involves order and intelligibility. The information in DNA can be seen as part of this rational structure placed there by the Logos. Thomas Aquinas, drawing on Aristotle, argued that the order and teleology we observe in nature, things acting toward ends, requires an ultimate intelligent cause. DNA's function of encoding instructions for life is a prime example of such teleology. The specified complexity of the genetic code is not an accident. It is the work of the divine intelligence who orders all things according to his wisdom. Second, primary and secondary causation. Aquinas distinguished between God as the primary cause and natural processes as secondary causes. God is the ultimate source of all being and causality, but he often works through natural means. When we say that DNA points to intelligent design, we are not denying that God may use natural processes. Rather, we are affirming that those processes themselves depend on God's creative rationality. The origin of information in DNA is a place where we see God's direct creative activity most clearly. Secondary causes cannot account for the origin of specified complexity. Third, creation ex nihilo. Orthodox Christianity teaches that God created the universe out of nothing. This includes the creation of matter, energy, laws of nature, and the information that structures life. The origin of biological information is not just a rearrangement of pre-existing matter, it is the imposition of rationality and order onto matter by a transcendent mind. This aligns perfectly with the evidence. Information does not arise from matter alone. It requires a mind.
Let's address some common objections to the design argument in the context of the origin of life. Objection 1. We just don't know yet. Science will eventually explain it. This is an appeal to future scientific progress, essentially a promissory note. After 70 years of intense research since Miller-Urey, we are no closer to a naturalistic explanation for life's origin. In fact, as our knowledge has increased, the problem has become harder, not easier. We now know how much specified complexity is required even for the simplest living cell. This is not a gap that will be filled with more research. It is a fundamental conceptual problem. Information requires intelligence. No amount of time or chance will change that principle. Objection 2. Life could have arisen by some unknown natural process we haven't discovered. This is possible in principle, but it is not a scientific explanation. It is speculation. Science works by inference to the best explanation based on what we know. And what we know is that specified information always comes from minds. To posit an unknown natural process is to abandon the method of abductive reasoning that Turek uses. It is also a kind of naturalism of the gaps, assuming naturalism must be true and therefore some natural explanation must exist, even if we have no evidence for it. Objection 4. This is just God of the gaps reasoning. Not at all. We are not arguing from ignorance. We don't know, therefore God. We are arguing from positive evidence. Specified complexity is the hallmark of intelligence. When we see it in DNA, we infer an intelligent cause for the same reason we infer an author when we see a book. This is not a gap argument. It is an inference based on uniform experience and established principles.
Let me offer some recommendations for strengthening Turek's argument on the origin of life. First, emphasize the distinction between operational science and historical science. Operational science deals with repeatable, observable processes. Historical science deals with unique past events and relies on inference to the best explanation. The origin of life is a historical event. We cannot repeat it in a lab. We must reason backward from the evidence we have now. and the best explanation for the origin of specified information is intelligent design. Next, engage with the work of origin-of-life researchers who are skeptical of naturalism. James Tour is a prominent example, but there are others. Their critiques are not based on ignorance, but on deep expertise. This lends credibility to the design argument. Third, clarify the role of evolution. Natural selection can explain the modification and refinement of existing information in living organisms. It cannot explain the origin of the first living system with its genetic code. Turek should make clear that the design argument applies primarily to origins, not to subsequent development. Furthermore, integrate the Christian doctrine of creation more explicitly. The design argument is a piece of natural theology, reasoning from nature to God, but it gains depth when connected to revealed theology. The Logos doctrine, creation ex nihilo, and God's ongoing providence provide a rich theological framework for understanding biological information. In summary, the origin of life poses an insurmountable problem for naturalistic explanations. The probability of assembling functional proteins and nucleic acids by chance is vanishingly small. The origin of specified information in DNA points powerfully to an intelligent cause, and Christian theology provides a robust framework for understanding this. The Logos, who is the source of all rationality and order, is the creator of life. This argument does not replace scientific investigation, it complements it. Science reveals the complexity and specified nature of biological systems. Theology provides the ultimate explanation, God, the intelligent and rational creator. Next, on slide 28, we will examine the Cambrian explosion, the sudden appearance of complex animal body plans in the fossil record, and explore why this event poses another significant challenge to purely naturalistic accounts of life's history.
Welcome to slide 28, where we examine one of the most dramatic events in the history of life, the Cambrian explosion. Frank Turek highlights this event as powerful evidence for intelligent design, arguing that the sudden appearance of complex animal body plans contradicts the gradualism predicted by Darwinian evolution. Let me begin with the basic facts. About 541 million years ago, during a geologically brief period called the Cambrian explosion, lasting roughly 10 to 20 million years, most of the major animal phyla we see today appeared suddenly in the fossil record. This includes arthropods like trilobites, mollusks, echinoderms, chordates, and many other groups. Before this period, the fossil record shows mostly simple single-celled organisms and some soft-bodied multicellular forms. Then, in a geological instant, we see an explosion of complexity and diversity. The term explosion is apt. Stephen Jay Gould, the late evolutionary biologist and paleontologist, called it the most striking fact about the fossil record. Darwin himself was deeply troubled by it. In The Origin of Species, he wrote, "The difficulty of understanding the absence of vast piles of fossiliferous strata rich in fossils beneath the Silurian system is very great." He hoped future discoveries would fill in the gaps. But after 160 years of intensive fossil hunting, the pattern remains. The Cambrian explosion is real and it is abrupt.
What makes this significant for the design argument? 3 main points. First, the suddenness. If life evolved gradually from simpler to more complex forms over vast spans of time, we should expect to find a continuous series of transitional fossils leading up to the Cambrian. We don't. Instead, the major animal body plans appear fully formed, with no clear ancestors in the pre-Cambrian rocks. This is sometimes called the top-down pattern. Complexity appears first and then diversifies within those basic plans, rather than building up slowly from the bottom. Second, the complexity. These Cambrian animals were not simple.
Trilobites, for example, had compound eyes with hundreds of lenses, sophisticated nervous systems, articulated exoskeletons, and complex appendages for locomotion and feeding. The level of functional integration and specified complexity is staggering. To go from simple multicellular organisms to trilobites in 10 million years is like going from a bicycle to a jumbo jet in a single generation. The fossil record does not show the gradual accumulation of small changes. It shows large-scale innovation in body plans. Third, the disparity before diversity. In evolutionary theory, we expect diversity to come first, many small variations, and then disparity, as some lineages diverge more radically. But the Cambrian shows the opposite, high disparity right away. The major body plans appear early, and subsequent history is mostly variation within those plans. This is consistent with the design hypothesis. A designer creates the basic blueprints, the phyla, and then allows variation and adaptation within those frameworks.
Let's enhance Dr. Turek's argument with some critical insights. First, let's clarify what we mean by a body plan or phylum. A body plan refers to the fundamental architectural layout of an organism, including features such as its symmetry, segmentation, and nervous system organization. Phyla, like arthropods and chordates, represent these unique organizational types. Next, addressing the artifact of preservation objection, some argue that Precambrian ancestors were too soft-bodied to fossilize. However, given that soft-bodied Ediacaran fossils exist, and Cambrian soft-bodied fossils include worms, this points to a preservation possibility that highlights a genuine absence of transitional forms rather than a mere gap. Moreover, the Cambrian explosion challenges not only paleontology, but also modern molecular and developmental biology. Establishing new body plans necessitates significant new genetic information and regulatory networks, a task not adequately accounted for by unguided processes like random mutation and natural selection. Finally, let's reference noted paleontologists and biologists like the late James Valentine and Stephen Meyer, who questioned neo-Darwinian sufficiency. Even mainstream figures like Eugene Koonin have proposed that mechanisms beyond traditional neo-Darwinism might be necessary.
Now let's delve deeper into the concept of body plan complexity and explore why the top-down pattern observed in the Cambrian explosion supports the design hypothesis. What exactly is a body plan? A body plan, or bow plan, is the fundamental architectural blueprint of an organism. It encompasses the organism's symmetry, segmentation, number and arrangement of limbs, positioning of sensory organs, layout of the nervous system, and digestive tract organization. These are not superficial features. They are encoded in the organism's developmental program and reflected in its genome. The Cambrian animals exhibited a remarkable diversity of body plans. We see bilateral symmetry, radial symmetry, segmentation, jointed appendages, internal skeletons, external shells, complex eyes, and sophisticated nervous systems, all appearing in a geological instant. This is not incremental change, it is fundamental innovation at the highest taxonomic levels. Consider the difference between a flatworm and a vertebrate. Both have bilateral symmetry, but their internal organization is vastly different. A flatworm has no body cavity, a simple nervous system, and no circulatory system. A vertebrate has a coelom, a dorsal nerve cord encased in a vertebral column, a closed circulatory system with a heart, and complex organ systems. These differences are not merely variations on a theme. They represent fundamentally different ways of organizing a living body, and the Cambrian explosion produces multiple such body plans simultaneously.
Let's examine the top-down pattern of evolution more closely. In Darwinian evolution, we anticipate a bottom-up pattern where simple variations accumulate over time, gradually leading to larger differences. Species diversify first, followed by genera, families, orders, classes, and finally phyla. This resembles a tree-like branching from the bottom up. However, the fossil record presents the opposite. The Cambrian explosion reveals high disparity, with major differences in body plans appearing right at the onset. Subsequent history shows diversity within these plans, encompassing many species, genera, and families, but no new phyla are introduced. In fact, since the Cambrian, we have lost phyla rather than gained any. This demonstrates a top-down pattern. Major blueprints appear first, and variations occur within them. This aligns more with design than unguided evolution. A designer would establish basic architectural plans, the phyla, and allow variation and adaptation within these frameworks. Consider human engineering. An engineer designs the basic plans for structures like skyscrapers, bridges, and domes, and variations then occur in size, materials, and details. But the fundamental structural principles come first. The Cambrian explosion resembles the work of an engineer who preloaded the basic designs. Allow me to strengthen Turek's argument further. The genetic and developmental basis of body plans involves what are called Hox genes and other regulatory genes. These are master control genes that direct the development of body structures. Small changes in Hox genes can have substantial downstream effects on body structure. However, and this is crucial, such changes are typically deleterious, disrupting coordinated development. To construct a new body plan, one requires not just new Hox genes, but an entire coordinated regulatory network specifying when and where body structures develop. This necessitates vast quantities of new specified information. So far, there is no known natural mechanism that can produce such information within the time frame of the Cambrian explosion.
The challenge of life's complexity is not merely an issue of improbability, it is a deep conceptual conundrum. How does one transition from an absence of blueprints to the existence of multiple intricate blueprints without invoking the presence of an intelligent agent? While mutations can alter existing blueprints, often referred to as microevolution or adaptation within a species, the origin of the blueprints themselves remains an enigma. Here, design offers a compelling explanation. Blueprints derive from minds. Frank Turek often employs the analogy of a house to illustrate this concept. You can alter a house's paint color, reconfigure its furniture, or add new rooms, representative of variations. However, the essential architectural framework, the foundation, walls, and roof, necessitates an architect. Similarly, in biology, the animals of the Cambrian period exemplify fundamentally distinct architectural plans, with their origins suggesting the presence of an architect. A common objection posits, evolution has had hundreds of millions of years since the Cambrian. Could new body plans not have evolved during this time? This objection overlooks that the Cambrian explosion occurred after over 3 billion years of life on Earth. If new body plans were prone to evolve, such an occurrence should have been consistent. Instead, the fossil record displays stasis and extinction with no major new body plans since the Cambrian, suggesting that period was a unique creative event rather than the inception of continued body plan development. Another objection contends molecular clocks indicate some lineages diverged prior to the Cambrian. Perhaps the explosion is just a fossilization artifact. Yet molecular clocks rely on assumptions regarding mutation rates and produce variable results. Even if genetic divergences preceded the Cambrian, the morphological explosion, the sudden emergence of complex body structures, persists. Thus, the challenge endures. How was the genetic information for these body plans? The Cambrian explosion has long fascinated scientists and theologians alike, marked by the sudden emergence of complex body clans. In the view of Christian orthodox theology, as articulated in the Logos doctrine, this event can be seen as embodying the creative act described in John 1:3. Through him all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. Here, the Greek term egeneto, meaning coming into being, underscores a divine act of bringing forth. The sudden appearance of trilobites' compound eyes, arthropods' segmented bodies, and early chordates' notochord highlights the intentional and structured creativity of the Logos, who is the divine reason, the architect of biological information and form. Thomas Aquinas illuminated the distinction between primary causes and secondary causes, which the Cambrian explosion exemplifies. While environmental triggers serve as secondary causes, the intricate genetic and developmental information underlying new body plans signifies an act of primary causation. Only the direct creative activity of God could introduce such specified complexity. Furthermore, Augustine's doctrine of seminal reasons proposes that God embedded rational principles at creation's inception, which unfurl over time. The Cambrian event, then, may reflect the unfolding of these seminal reasons, the potentialities ordained by God realized through natural processes. Lastly, Orthodox Christianity's tenet of creation ex nihilo, where God creates the universe from nothing, reaffirms the origin of new forms seen in the Cambrian. These body plans are not simply modified old material, but new organizational structures imprinted with rational order, evidencing a transcendent mind influencing matter.
Now let's address some objections to the design inference from the Cambrian explosion. Objection 1. The Cambrian explosion took 10 to 20 million years. That's plenty of time for evolution to work. In geological terms, 10 to 20 million years is quite brief, less than 0.5% of Earth's history. More importantly, it's not just about time, but about the mechanism. Even with millions of years, random mutation and natural selection struggle to account for the vast new genetic information required for multiple novel body plans. Time alone doesn't solve the information problem, rather it emphasizes it. The fossil record depicts these body plans appearing suddenly, not gradually over millions of years. Objection 2. Maybe the transitional forms existed but weren't preserved in the fossil record. This has been discussed extensively, but it's crucial to highlight that the Cambrian fossil record is quite robust. Thousands of well-preserved specimens, including soft-bodied organisms, exist. The Burgess Shale and Changjiang formations provide exquisite detail. If abundant transitional forms existed, we should find them. Instead, we observe fully formed body plans, reflecting a real biological pattern, not a preservation artifact. Objection 3. Intelligent design is religiously motivated and therefore not objective science. This constitutes an ad hominem fallacy, attacking the motive instead of the argument. The truth of a claim is separate from the intent behind it. Every scientist holds philosophical commitments shaping their research. Naturalists commit to naturalism, theists to theism. The essential question is, which framework best explains the evidence? The design inference from the Cambrian explosion employs the reasoning used in other fields. Specified complexity indicates intelligence. Its alignment with theism doesn't invalidate it. Objection 4. Science will eventually explain the Cambrian explosion naturalistically. This represents an appeal to future progress, a promissory note. Despite over a century of research, the explanatory gap remains significant. As we continue uncovering the genetic and developmental complexities required for body plans, the challenge intensifies, not diminishes. At some juncture, we must acknowledge that the evidence points away from naturalistic mechanisms and towards intelligent causation.
First, emphasize the information requirement. Building new body plans is not just a matter of anatomical innovation. It requires new genes, new regulatory networks, and new developmental programs. This is the origin of biological information at the highest level. Connect this explicitly to the arguments from information we discussed in earlier slides. The Cambrian explosion is not just a paleontological puzzle, it is an information problem. Second, engage with the work of paleontologists and biologists who acknowledge the difficulty. James Valentine, Simon Conway Morris, and even some mainstream evolutionists have noted that the Cambrian poses significant challenges. Stephen Meyer's Darwin's Doubt is a comprehensive treatment of the subject from a design perspective. These are not fringe views, they are serious scholarly engagements with the evidence. Third, clarify the role of microevolution versus macroevolution. Natural selection can account for variation within body plans, the diversification of arthropods into different species, for example. But it cannot account for the origin of the body plans themselves. Turek should distinguish clearly between these two kinds of change. The design argument applies to the latter, not the former. Fourth, integrate Christian theology more explicitly. The Cambrian explosion is not just evidence for a generic designer, it is evidence for the God of the Bible who creates by His word, who orders all things according to His wisdom, and who brings forth life in abundance. The Logos doctrine, creation ex nihilo, and divine providence provide a rich theological context for understanding the Cambrian. In summary, the Cambrian explosion is one of the most dramatic events in the history of life. The sudden appearance of multiple complex body plans in a geologically brief period without clear transitional ancestors challenges gradualistic Darwinian evolution and points powerfully toward intelligent design. The top-down pattern, high disparity before diversity, is consistent with the work of a designer who creates the basic architectural blueprints and allows variation within them. The genetic and developmental complexity required for new body plans points to the Logos, the divine word and reason, as the ultimate source of biological information and form. This argument is not a gap argument, it is an inference based on positive evidence. Specified complexity in the fossil record, just as in DNA, points to intelligence, and Christian theology provides the most satisfying ultimate explanation. The God who spoke the universe into being is the same God who, in the Cambrian period, brought forth an explosion of new life forms, each reflecting His wisdom, power, and creativity. Next, on slide 29, we will explore what lies beyond DNA, epigenetics, cellular machinery, and the additional layers of information and complexity that make life possible. Welcome to slide 29, where we explore the layers of biological information and complexity that exist beyond the DNA sequence itself. Frank Turek argues that DNA is just the beginning. Cells contain multiple overlapping information systems, sophisticated molecular machines, and regulatory networks that all point to intelligent design. DNA is often called the blueprint of life, but this analogy is misleading. A blueprint is a complete set of instructions for building something. DNA by itself is more like a parts list. It specifies the components, but not how to assemble them, when to use them, or where to place them. The cell needs additional layers of information to turn genetic code into a functioning organism. This is where epigenetics comes in. The term epigenetics means above genetics. It refers to information that sits on top of the DNA sequence and regulates which genes are turned on or off, when and to what degree. Think of DNA as hardware and epigenetics as software that runs on that hardware. Both are essential, neither works without the other.
There are several major epigenetic mechanisms. First, DNA methylation. Chemical tags called methyl groups attach to DNA bases and can silence genes. Second, histone modification. DNA wraps around proteins called histones, and modifications to these histones affect how tightly or loosely the DNA is coiled, controlling gene accessibility. Third, chromatin remodeling. The three-dimensional structure of chromosomes changes to expose or hide certain genes. Fourth, non-coding RNAs. Molecules like microRNAs regulate gene expression without being translated into proteins themselves. Here's the critical point. These epigenetic marks are information. They are not random, they are functionally specified. They tell the cell which genes to express in which tissues at which times. A liver cell and a brain cell have the same DNA sequence, but their epigenetic marks are different, causing them to produce different proteins and perform different functions. The origin of this epigenetic information is just as mysterious from a naturalistic standpoint as the origin of genetic information. Moreover, some epigenetic marks are heritable. They can be passed from parent to offspring. This means there is a non-genetic inheritance system running parallel to DNA. This was unexpected from a neo-Darwinian perspective, which assumed all heritable information was in the genes. The existence of epigenetic inheritance adds another layer of complexity and another information system that needs explaining.
Now let's delve into the remarkable world of cellular machinery, a cornerstone of life's complexity. DNA does not decode itself. To translate genetic information into functional proteins requires a sophisticated network of molecular machines. RNA polymerase initiates this process by transcribing DNA into messenger RNA. Then ribosomes take over, translating this mRNA into protein sequences. This translation is a marvel of biological engineering, like a highly structured assembly line where each machine has a vital role. We also find chaperone proteins, ensuring that newly formed proteins fold correctly into their three-dimensional shapes. Molecular motors, akin to cellular couriers, transport these proteins to their designated locations within the cell. Furthermore, the cell employs quality control systems that detect and correct misfolded proteins, ensuring robustness and efficiency. Each of these molecular machines is composed of proteins, which paradoxically are encoded by genes. Herein lies a classic chicken and egg conundrum. Proteins are required to read genes, yet you need genes to synthesize proteins. How did this elegantly interdependent system come into existence? Consider the ribosome, a molecular machine of astonishing intricacy, composed of dozens of proteins and several RNA molecules. It reads the genetic code from mRNA, matches each three-letter codon to its corresponding amino acid, and precisely assembles proteins through translation. This system demands not only the ribosome, but also essential elements like transfer RNAs and amino-acyl tRNA synthetases. The complexity here is nothing short of astounding. Then there's ATP synthase, an extraordinary molecular motor generating ATP, the energy currency of the cell. It operates like a miniature turbine, its shaft spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute, powered by a flow of protons across a membrane. Found in all life forms, ATP synthase epitomizes an advanced engineering design, showcasing rotary motion, energy conversion, and precision mechanics.
Frank Turek emphasizes molecular machines as evidence of intelligent design, with Michael Behe, a prominent biochemist, introducing irreducible complexity.
This term describes systems like the bacterial flagellum, blood clotting cascades, and the immune system, all requiring functional and complete components, challenging gradualistic Darwinian evolution that demands each intermediate to be searchable. Next, to strengthen Turek's argument, we must highlight the distinction between sequence information and structural information. DNA encodes linear nucleotide sequences. However, proteins adopt three-dimensional shapes. This folding is influenced by cellular conditions, chaperone proteins, and post-translational modifications. Thus, cell structure information extends beyond DNA. What is the origin of this structured information? We should also engage with the concept of specified complexity across multiple levels. DNA sequences exemplify specified complexity, but so do protein structures, cellular organization, developmental programs, and ecological ecosystems. Each level possesses functional specificity, demonstrating purposeful complexity. This multi-layered specified complexity indicates design. Lastly, consider systems biology. Modern biology acknowledges that life revolves around interconnected systems, networks involving genes, proteins, metabolites, and signals. These systems display robustness, modularity, and feedback control, echoing engineered systems characteristics. A cell is an integrated system processing information, not a random chemical aggregate.
Let's delve into the fascinating world of specific molecular machines that make cellular life possible, focusing first on the bacterial flagellum. This is one of the most iconic examples of molecular machinery, a rotary motor that propels bacteria through liquid. It consists of about 40 different protein parts: a rotor, a stator, a drive shaft, a universal joint, and a propeller. These components are arranged with the precision of an outboard motor. Remarkably, the flagellum can spin up to 100,000 revolutions per minute and can reverse direction in just a quarter of a turn. Michael B. has famously argued that the flagellum is irreducibly complex. He posits that if you remove any one of its core components, it ceases to function. Critics have attempted to explain the flagellum's origin through co-option of simpler systems, pointing to the type 3 secretion system as a potential precursor. However, this doesn't solve the problem, it merely shifts it. The type 3 secretion system is itself complex and requires an explanation. Additionally, the flagellum contains unique proteins not found in other systems, and its assembly requires an advanced genetic program, making the origin of this integrated system a significant challenge for unguided evolution. Next, let's revisit the ribosome, a massive molecular complex composed of ribosomal RNA and dozens of proteins. It features two main subunits that clamp together around messenger RNA. As the ribosome moves along the mRNA, it reads 3 nucleotide codons and catalyzes the formation of peptide bonds between amino acids, constructing a protein chain.
But here's the remarkable part. The ribosome exhibits multiple levels of information processing. It must recognize the start codon to begin translation, maintain the reading frame, shift by even one nucleotide, and the entire sequence is garbled. It must recruit the correct transfer RNAs with their attached amino acids, proofread to ensure accuracy, and recognize stop codons to terminate translation. All of this happens with extraordinary speed and precision. The ribosome is not just a machine, it is an information processing computer made of molecules. Third, ATP synthase, the molecular turbine. This enzyme, found in the inner membrane of mitochondria and in the membranes of chloroplasts, consists of two main parts: F0, which is embedded in the membrane and acts as a rotor, and F1, which protrudes into the matrix and acts as a catalytic head. Protons flowing through F0 cause it to spin, and this mechanical rotation is coupled to chemical synthesis in F1, where ADP and phosphate are joined to form ATP. The elegance of ATP synthase is stunning. It converts electrochemical energy into mechanical rotation and then into chemical bond energy. It operates near 100% efficiency, better than any human-designed engine, and its structure is conserved across all domains of life, suggesting it was present in the very first cells. How did such a machine arise by unguided processes? No plausible evolutionary pathway has been demonstrated. Now let's talk about information layers beyond the genetic code. We've discussed epigenetics, DNA methylation, histone modifications, chromatin structure, but there are even more layers.
The cell's genome organization is not random. It's intricately structured into specific territories and loops to bring distant regulatory elements close to their target genes, dynamically influencing gene expression. This spatial architecture can be considered another layer of information. Furthermore, post-translational modifications, such as phosphorylation and glycosylation, highlight the complexity beyond DNA sequences, allowing a single gene to produce multiple functional proteins. The membrane's lipid composition and the sugar and bioelectric codes further exemplify multi-layered information systems in play. As Frank Turek emphasizes, the true enigma is not solely the DNA, but these intricate overlapping systems which point to an intelligent design beyond mere unguided natural processes.
Let's delve into the Christian orthodox theology on the multi-layered complexity of life. First, the Logos doctrine and biological complexity. John 1:3 tells us, "Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made." The Greek term all things encompasses not just the physical universe, but every aspect of creation: matter, energy, form, and information. The complex molecular machines and information systems within cells are part of all things created through the Logos. The Logos is more than a creative force. It embodies the principle of order, rationality, and meaning. When we observe a ribosome translating genetic code with extraordinary precision, or ATP synthase converting energy with near-perfect efficiency, we witness the handiwork of divine intelligence. These systems are not arbitrary. They display rationality, purpose, and functional integration, all pointing back to the Logos as their source. Augustine taught that God created with seminal reasons, rational principles embedded in creation. The multi-layered information systems in cells, genetic, epigenetic, structural, chemical, manifest these seminal reasons, reflecting the creative activity of the divine mind according to God's wisdom and providence. Thomas Aquinas emphasized God as the primary cause of all being, with natural processes acting as secondary causes. The molecular machines in cells function according to natural laws: chemistry, thermodynamics, kinetics. However, these laws and the information directing molecular processes ultimately depend on God as the primary cause. Secondary causes cannot explain the origin of specified complexity. This necessitates God's creative action.
Now, let's address some objections to the design argument from cellular complexity. Objection 1. Complex systems can arise through natural selection acting on random mutations. Response: natural selection requires replicators, entities that can reproduce with variation. It presupposes the existence of life and the machinery of reproduction. The origin of the first replicator, with its genetic code, translation machinery, and metabolic systems, cannot be explained by natural selection. Moreover, natural selection refines existing information, It does not create the vast amounts of new specified information required for molecular machines. The origin of these systems points to design. Objection 2. Irreducible complexity has been refuted. Evolutionary pathways have been proposed for flagella and other systems. Response: proposing a pathway is not demonstrating it. Many proposed pathways involve significant assumptions, spontaneous gene duplications, fortuitous co-option, and functional transitions, without explaining how the necessary information arose. Moreover, even if a system could be built incrementally, it would still exhibit specified complexity at each stage. The question remains, where did the information come from? Design provides an answer. Information comes from minds. Objection 3. Cells are full of junk, non-functional DNA, vestigial structures, suboptimal designs. This is evidence against intelligent design. Response: the junk DNA argument has been largely overturned by the ENCODE project, which found that the vast majority of the genome is functionally significant, involved in regulation, splicing, chromatin structure, and more. What we once dismissed as junk is now recognized as functional. As for suboptimal designs, we must be careful not to assume we know what an optimal design would look like. Many so-called bad designs turn out to have functional explanations when studied more carefully. Moreover, design does not require perfection. It requires evidence of intelligence and purpose, which is abundant in cellular systems. Objection 4. This is just God of the gaps, inserting God where science hasn't explained it yet. Response: this is not a gap argument. We are not arguing from ignorance. We are arguing from positive evidence. Specified complexity, irreducible complexity, functional integration, and information processing are hallmarks of intelligent design. When we see these characteristics in human artifacts, computers, machines, programs, we infer intelligence. The same inference applies to cellular systems. This is not a gap, it is a pattern.
Let us strengthen Turek's argument on cellular complexity by first emphasizing systems biology. The cell is not merely a collection of molecules, but an integrated information processing system. Systems biology reveals networks, feedback loops, robustness, and modularity, all hallmarks of engineered systems, indicative of design at the systems level. Next, consider the ongoing challenges in origin of life research. Despite decades of effort, no naturalistic pathway from non-living chemicals to a living cell has been demonstrated. James Turek, a prominent chemist, emphasizes how this gap is widening as we discover more complexity. This bolsters the design argument. Furthermore, cellular complexity should be connected to the broader information argument. DNA represents just one layer of biological information. Epigenetics, protein folding, and cellular organization all underscore the presence of an information-rich system, pointing to a mind as the source. It is crucial to integrate Christian theology explicitly. The design argument is a facet of natural theology, but gains depth when linked to revealed theology. The Logos doctrine, creation ex nihilo, and divine providence provide a rich framework for understanding cellular complexity. In conclusion, life is more than DNA. Cells are composed of molecular machines, epigenetic codes, and regulatory networks, exhibiting specified complexity and functional integration. The origin and coordination of these systems suggest intelligent design, the Logos, the divine word and reason, as the creator of life. This argument is not from ignorance but positive evidence, as specified complexity and functional integration are abundant in cellular systems. Christian theology offers the ultimate explanation. God, who spoke the universe into being, also designed the machinery of life, reflecting his wisdom,
power and creativity. Next, on slide 30, we will delve into intentionality and final causes in nature, the idea that natural objects act with purpose, showcasing a designer who orders all things toward their ends.
Let's examine intentionality and final causes in nature, a concept central to Frank Turek's design argument. The term intentionality in philosophy refers to the directedness or aboutness of things. When we say thoughts are about something, we're describing intentionality. But Turek extends this further. He argues that natural objects themselves display purposeful directedness. They act for an end, even without conscious awareness. This is the classical notion of final causality from Aristotelian Thomistic philosophy. An acorn grows toward becoming an oak tree. A heart pumps blood to sustain the organism. These aren't random processes, they exhibit goal-directedness. Turek claims this inherent teleology in nature points to an intelligent designer who embedded purposes into the fabric of creation. The argument is straightforward. If natural systems consistently act towards specific ends, and if chance plus necessity alone can't account for such directedness, then an intelligent cause must have ordained these purposes. Let's unpack this step by step.
Now let me offer some critical strengthening for Turek's argument. First, we should distinguish between intrinsic and extrinsic teleology. Intrinsic teleology means the goal-directedness is built into the thing itself, like the acorn's inherent tendency to become an oak. Extrinsic teleology is when something is used for a purpose by an external agent, like a hammer being used to drive nails. Turek's strongest case rests on intrinsic teleology, biological systems that display purpose from within, not merely imposed from outside. Second, modern biology has largely abandoned teleological language, preferring mechanistic explanations. Yet the appearance of purpose remains. Genes code for proteins. Organs function to maintain homeostasis. The heart doesn't just pump, it pumps in order to circulate blood. Even if we describe this in terms of natural selection, we're left with the question, why does nature reliably produce systems that act as if designed for specific ends? Third, consider the convergence of multiple independent causal chains. A functioning organism requires thousands of coordinated processes: DNA replication, protein synthesis, cellular respiration, waste removal, all working in concert toward the same end, survival and reproduction. The simultaneous coordination of so many independent factors toward a unified goal is what demands explanation. Chance alone can't account for such multi-level purposeful integration.
Let's examine specific examples of final causality in nature. Consider the phenomenon of homeostasis, the body's ability to maintain stable internal conditions despite external changes. When your blood sugar drops, your pancreas releases glucagon to raise it. When it rises too high, insulin is released to lower it. This isn't random fluctuation, it's a regulatory system acting toward a specific end, metabolic equilibrium. Or consider photosynthesis. Plants convert sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water into glucose and oxygen through a complex series of light-dependent and light-independent reactions. Each step is precisely calibrated to produce a specific outcome. The entire process is directed toward the end of energy capture and storage. Now, natural selection is often invoked to explain these phenomena, but notice what natural selection presupposes. It requires replicating organisms that already possess goal-directed processes. Selection can filter existing functions, but it cannot create the functional directedness itself. As philosopher Edward Fazer notes, final causality must already be present for natural selection to have anything to work on. The capacity for a system to malfunction implies it has a proper function to begin with. A heart can fail, but that presumes hearts are supposed to pump blood.
Malfunction only makes sense against the backdrop of intended function.
The philosophical argument for final causality can be formulated this way. Premise 1. Natural objects regularly and reliably act toward specific ends: acorns toward oak trees, hearts toward pumping blood, eyes toward seeing. Premise 2. Such regular goal-directedness cannot be explained by the objects themselves if they lack consciousness or foresight. Premise 3. Nor can it be explained by chance, since chance produces randomness, not consistent directedness toward specific outcomes. Premise 4. Therefore, the goal-directedness in nature must be explained by an intelligent cause that ordained these purposes. This is essentially Aquinas' fifth way, the argument from design based on final causality. Now, mechanistic science tried to eliminate final causes by reducing everything to efficient causes, one billiard ball striking another. But as philosopher James Ross argued, even mechanistic explanations smuggle in teleology. When we say this gene codes for that protein, we are describing a relationship that points beyond mere physical interaction toward informational content and functional outcome. The modern information theory actually reinforces this. Information is defined by its relationship to a goal or meaning. DNA doesn't just chemically react, it specifies outcomes. Specification implies purpose, and purpose implies mind.
Now, let's integrate Christian orthodox theology with this argument from final causality. The concept of the Logos, God's eternal word and reason, is absolutely central here. In John chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, we read, "In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him nothing came into being that has come into being." The Logos is not merely a creative force, it is divine rationality itself, the principle of order, purpose, and intelligibility woven into creation. When we observe final causality in nature, the acorn's directedness toward becoming an oak, the heart's purpose of pumping blood, we are witnessing the outworking of the Logos in creation. Saint Maximus the Confessor taught that every creature has a logos with a lowercase l, a divine principle or reason embedded in it by the logos. These logoi are God's eternal intentions for each created thing. Creation is not a random accident, but a purposeful expression of divine wisdom. Aquinas, building on this tradition, distinguished between God as the primary cause and natural processes as secondary causes. God doesn't compete with natural causes, he works through them. The directedness we observe in nature is simultaneously a natural property and a divine ordination. The acorn grows into an oak by its natural powers, but those powers themselves are sustained by God's continuous creative activity.
Let's address some objections to the argument from final causality. Objection 1. Teleology is just an illusion. Natural selection produces the appearance of purpose without actual purpose. Response. This objection confuses mechanism with meaning. Yes, natural selection can shape functional structures, but it presupposes goal-directed processes, reproduction, survival, adaptation. These are inherently teleological concepts. Selection filters, it doesn't create the directedness it filters. Moreover, natural selection itself operates according to principles, variation, heredity, differential survival that exhibit purposeful patterns. Why should undirected processes reliably produce systems that act as if designed for ends? Objection 2. We don't need God to explain final causes. They're just emergent properties of complex systems. Response. Emergence doesn't eliminate the need for an explanation, it relocates it. If complex systems exhibit new properties not reducible to their parts, we must ask why these particular arrangements produce purposeful outcomes rather than chaos. The fine-tuning required for emergent, purposeful systems is itself evidence of design. Objection 3. Aristotelian final causes were rejected by modern science. They're outdated. Response: modern science rejected final causes as explanatory tools within physics and chemistry, not as real features of nature. Biological function, information content, and goal-directedness remain ineliminable from life sciences. Even physicists like Paul Davies acknowledge that biology exhibits purpose in ways physics does not. The question isn't whether teleology exists, but how to explain it.
Let me offer several recommendations for strengthening Turek's argument from intentionality and final causes. First, emphasize intrinsic teleology, the built-in goal-directedness of biological systems, rather than simply pointing to design in a vague sense. Distinguish between artifacts, which have extrinsic teleology, and organisms, which demonstrate intrinsic teleology. The latter is philosophically stronger because it can't be dismissed as a mere projection of human purposes onto nature. Second, engage with contemporary philosophy of biology. Scholars like James Barnum, Stuart Kaufman, and even atheist Thomas Nagel recognize that teleology poses significant challenges for reductionist materialism. Citing these voices shows that final causality is not merely a religious talking point, but a legitimate issue in the philosophy of science. Third, connect the argument explicitly to information theory and semiotics. Information is defined by its relationship to meaning and purpose. DNA encodes specifications for outcomes, which is inherently teleological. Charles Peirce's semiotics demonstrates that signs, like genetic codes, require interpretation, which presupposes a mind. Fourth, integrate the theological concept of divine providence. In orthodox theology, God's providence isn't about occasional interventions, but the continuous sustaining of creation according to the logoi, the divine purposes embedded in each creature. This provides a coherent metaphysical framework for final causality that surpasses naturalism. Lastly, confront the apparent design objection directly. If something consistently exhibits the features of design, specified complexity, functional integration, goal-directedness, at what point does denying actual design become question-begging? In summary, final causality in nature, the directedness of living systems towards specific ends, point to an intelligent cause, the logos through whom all things were made. This argument complements the arguments from information and complexity we examined in previous slides. Next, we'll address common objections to design arguments, including the God of the gaps accusation.